Am I the a-hole for refusing to share my inheritance with my dad and brother after discovering a family secret? My grandma, Dad's mom, left me my dad's portion of her inheritance but left him and my brother nothing. For context, me and my brother have never met my granddad. According to my dad, he and his father had a very toxic relationship. After my dad and my mom met, they started dating at university, and they had my brother. My parents then got married, which made my granddad stop talking to my dad. A couple of years later, had me, and we've been living happily ever after. After my granddad died, my dad began to spend more time with his mom. We got to also spend more time with her, and we even spent the Christmas holidays at their house. She was this sweet old lady who just loved us so much. Her energy was so electric and contagious. I won't lie when I say that Christmas as a teenager were my most cherished times. Sadly, my grandma passed away last year. After her funeral, I and my two aunties were called to speak to a lawyer. She died with a house worth more than $500,000. For context, she lived near Oxford, to her name, and over $200,000 worth of cash and other heirlooms. When we went through the inheritance, the lawyer explained that she divided it into 3 equal parts. It was between her 2 daughters and me, who got my dad's share of the inheritance. She left her son nothing. When my dad found out, he protested and asked how was that possible, but I wasn't too concerned. During the proceedings, my grandma's lawyer, who was in charge of the inheritance, gave me a letter written by her a year ago. In this letter, to be read after her death, she explained that her husband, my granddad, had disowned my dad completely. This is because my dad is not my brother's actual father, as he's a child from a relationship my mom had previously. My dad met my mom when she was pregnant with my brother. My grandparents, my granddad in particular, thought this was extremely weird. He did not approve of this and was vehemently against it. My dad didn't listen and married my mom a year after my brother was born, which prompted my granddad to excommunicate him for good. During the years, my grandma stayed in contact with my dad, but we, my brother and I, did not meet her until after my granddad died. The thing is, neither my brother nor I knew that my dad wasn't his biological father. A day later, my dad called me to discuss the inheritance, but I didn't want to meet him. He doesn't know that I know, and I don't know how to tell him I know. I haven't received any money yet, but based on this, I feel like I will not share it. My family are understandably calling me greedy, but I just don't really trust them anymore. This is already causing heavy division in my family, and now I feel like dropping this news will destroy my family completely. Should I just be truthful about the reasoning, or what should I do? I got pregnant at 16. My parents disowned me and tried taking custody of my daughter. After 10 years, my father. At 16, I slept with my good friend Jared. The condom broke and my daughter was created. My parents, who were great until this point, didn't like that and wanted me to get an abortion. I couldn't bring it over myself to. I wanted to keep the baby. Of course, my parents told me to pack my stuff and leave the house and their lives. So I did. I went to my friend's house and his parents took me in. They weren't thrilled, but they said that we all had to help as a new family member was in the making. In that time, my friend and I started to develop feelings for each other. I had my daughter, and about 2 months later, Jared's brother came back into their lives. He was a recovering drug addict. As we had the baby, my mother-in-law told him he could not stay with us. Eventually, they let him stay more and more, and he was spending nights until he had a relapse and stole a bunch of stuff. My parents got wind of that. They dug up a bunch of stuff and found out that my mother-in-law also fought addiction after an accident she had 15 years ago left her addicted to pain meds. So they called CPS on us and a whole investigation was opened. It was a dark time. I thought they were going to take my baby. In the end, they didn't find anything substantial. But them calling CPS on me transformed into a tradition over the years. As it was a small town, every mistake I made got back to my parents. I was half an hour late to pick up due to my job. CPS charges because neglect. I was out after 10 p.m. with my toddler. This happened twice because we went to family gatherings. CPS Christmas, loads of people stayed at Jared's house because it was a big family. CPS because many strange men were there. They eventually stopped it because they were fined for calling them on me unnecessarily. If they had done it more, I think it could have been an offense. The last call was 5 years ago. Eventually, Jared and I married when we were 23, and we are quite happy. We worked retail jobs and studied. It took us longer than average to graduate, but we did, with a lot of help of his parents. Jared is now an engineer and I work as a graphic designer. We were able to afford a big flat and finally moved out of his parents' house. Our lives look normal now. Anyway, a week ago I get a call from my mother who told me my father was diagnosed with terminal cancer and that his ultimate wish is to see me and my daughter again. I don't really know what to do. Because while they didn't have to take care of me while I was pregnant, I wished they had at least supported me. And while I get that they were panicking because they thought I was going to be an unfit mother, they made my life hell for 5 years. Update. After some thought, I decided to first meet my parents alone. I wanted to make a decision based on their remorse and development as human beings, and they sadly didn't really change. When I agreed to meet, I also told them it would be without my kid, IDKY, but they thought they were going to meet her. They had bought presents and all. They were very disappointed, to say it lightly, when I showed up without her. They made no deal to hide it. But we talked. They failed to take any real responsibility for their actions. Every apology began with, "We are sorry if you." When confronted about the CPS calls, they say they were doing what was best for daughter. I got really mad but tried not to snap. They brought up every mistake I did as a young mother and that they just thought I was far too young and irresponsible to have a kid. That daughter only turned up good because of luck. After they said that I laid down money for my meal, stood up and said, "Well, nothing has changed. You are still the heartless persons that threw me out years ago and made my life hell for 5 years. You will never meet her. She is happy, and she has loving grandparents." They started to freak out, saying that I couldn't withhold their grandchild from them. I just said that you lay in the bed you make. I left and haven't talked to them since. Mails or letters from them are thrown out on the spot. I will eventually explain to my daughter what happened to me and my parents and will give her the chance to meet them when she is older. But for now, I don't want to deal with their BS. Got married to who I thought was my dream girl. She was cheating from... This is by far the craziest thing I've ever experienced from all angles. This is the story of how my marriage lasted less than 4 months. I met her when I was 15, and she was 24. No, there was no inappropriate interactions back then. She was the older sister of one of my friends, and I had the biggest crush on her. You know when you're a kid and you meet someone you think is gorgeous and cool, so you idolize them without barely knowing anything about them? Yeah, that was my downfall. We remained in contact over the years, even after her brother and I fell out. She would check in now and then, wish me happy holidays. Simple things like that. When I turned 18, I had gotten right out of a relationship where I found out I was the other guy and was pretty broken up about it. I also wasn't medicated and I needed to be, so I was very reckless. I ended up growing a massive pair when I was drunk and texted her one of those super cringy "wanna hook up" messages. To my surprise, she told me to come over. I arrived at her house around 4 a.m. and was sobering up by this point. Instead of a hookup, I was sat on her couch and asked a bunch of relationship-based questions like I was being interrogated. Things like, why did your last relationships end? And would you consider yourself loyal? I guess I passed and we hooked up, only she told me not to leave in the morning. I was enamored and we ended up spending every waking moment together. I learned on day 2 that she had a boyfriend. I confronted her because we had even had a talk during her interrogation that I was still super hurt by being the other guy unknowingly with my last. After that conversation, he was wiped from all her socials. She told me she dumped him for me. I wouldn't have believed her if all of her friends weren't pushing me heavily to date her, telling me she adores me and I'd be stupid not to. So I did. We were official. Here is where it gets insane and stupid. 2 weeks in, we were drunk and having these super in-depth talks. I jokingly asked her to marry me. To my surprise, she took it serious. She said yes. That's when my shitty mental health was like, "You've always wanted a wife. Here is your chance to be with someone you've wanted for years." So we eloped that night. I moved in with her. We were together non-stop, only separated when I was doing shifts, and they weren't that long. I also often work from home. I told her more than I have ever told anyone to this day. I just dove right in and put my heart on my sleeve. I wanted it to work and have that real partnership. I was always there for her, comforted her about all her traumas, ran to her if she needed. I even cut off all my female friends, so almost all my friends, because I'm a very charismatic person who often comes off flirty. I was told if I accidentally flirted, she would leave me. I was trying to be all in. 2 months in. Yes, 2 months. She started getting distant and not answering her phone. She wouldn't want to be around me all the time anymore. She would disappear all the time and come home super late. I knew something was up, so I asked her. I told her she could tell me anything. She even knew from previous discussions I'm not a jealous person, that I do open or poly, but she didn't want that. She started gaslighting the proper use, telling me that everything was perfectly fine, that she loved me more than anyone, and she doesn't know why I would think anything is wrong. I knew it was off. Within a week, I was contacted by these 2 random dudes saying they wanted to talk to me. I already knew what was up. I met them at a local coffee shop with a girl that was my wife's friend. They told me so much. She had been 2-timing them behind my back. They didn't know she was married until she introduced them to her friends and expected them to say nothing. But her one friend did because she thought I deserved better. I was shown graphic text exchanges, nude photo exchanges. At least one had clearly been around since we got married, and they had been hooking up. She was talking me to them, saying I was neglecting her and ignored her. She was the one leaving me on red and not talking to me the past week, and prior we were hanging off each other. On top of that, her friend told me that relationship she had before didn't end when she told me it did. Her previous boyfriend left her when he became aware she was suddenly married to me. He didn't even know I existed. His girlfriend was just randomly married to someone else, and she picked up another right after. They asked me if I was going to stay with her, and I told them they could have her. At least one was kind of hostile and went, "Wow, you're giving up that easy. Why the hell would I stay?" I confronted her when I got home, even told her this was her last chance to tell me the truth. She told me I was crazy and she doesn't know why I wouldn't trust her. I showed her all the evidence. She acted baffled and like she didn't even know what it all was. So I packed my things and left. Filed for divorce immediately. The next day after I moved out, she was posting photos with another guy I didn't recognize. She was in a relationship with him now, less than 12 hours after her husband left her. Most her friends still liked me and would check in. This was apparently a pattern for her without the marriage, and every single tiny thing she told me was a lie. I was married to someone I didn't even know at all, and all I got from it was chlamydia. Might be my least favorite person I've ever met. If you're wondering, yes, she did try and hit me up later.